All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Chris. I
Good
know
to
that
see
you
you.
have a
Of
busy schedule and we appreciate your time.
course.
Okay. Well, we've all seen the latest kind of monthly-ish update. It's been about 2 months since the previous update, and I know that's a very curated video, and you just hit the highlights. Can you kind of tell us what's been going on? Is there anything details you can flesh out for us about what's been going on in the past 2 months?
Oh gosh, we film those updates and then we kind of hold onto them to release. So it's been so busy around here. I don't even know that I've really reflected on that update. But it's really just being busy with getting the first production intent parts in, building up these first vehicles, uh, finishing up a lot of the electrical engineering, firmware, software, app, UI, that sort of stuff. A lot of the mechanical stuff has been done for a very long time. Um, we had this suspension development stuff, which kind of lingered because we had two different software models between what they had in Italy and what we had here. So they wanted to correlate the data that they had and the way that they were finishing up the suspension, because they were the ones responsible for releasing the frame design. So torsional rigidity and how the suspension acted overall was something that we definitely wanted to have good data on. And the real world testing that we did in Italy, I think, let them finally put a pin in that. But to be honest, it didn't change
Okay.
hardly any. A couple hairs worth of degree changes here and there was all that they suggested, and we did take their suggestions because they're very good at what they do.
Okay.
um, so it's really been just how do we prepare for the first real testing and validation phases now that we put a pin in all the mechanical design. The electrical design and firmware and software can kind of be a little slower,
Sure.
but a lot of the big parts, especially like the body and chassis tooling, they just take so long to build those big ass parts.
Mhm.
Get those done first, get the vehicles here, and then we can refine and tune and do software and firmware and all that stuff basically along the way. So that's what's been keeping us busy, is just vendor agreements and contracts to get these first parts here and receiving these parts, and seeing what really works for production. Some things may only exist with the PI vehicles, and then we'll have to switch to another vendor for volume production.
Mm.
So that's also an interesting balancing act, is some of the volume suppliers are like, no, we can't just build you 20 of these parts. Like
I see.
either we build you 1,000 or we build you nothing.
Uh-huh.
There are some situations like that we've been having to sort through, but Jordan on the supply chain side has been doing an amazing job, and our help in Italy and Europe has been great, and even our partners in Asia have been doing some awesome things over the last couple months.
Okay. So going back to that suspension design, I noticed in the update that the suspension that you guys were using the beta for the suspension, but the beta like swing arms and all that stuff are different than the CAD drawings of the PI vehicle. So,
Uh, it's really all about the pivot points on where the suspension moves about.
mm,
So the production arms and stuff, they do look a bit different, but
mhm.
they're not really different in how they function.
Okay.
And so we went through some efforts on manufacturability and weight savings and stuff like that, and that changed the way some of the arms looked.
Mhm.
But from a kinematics perspective, they all still function the same. And the difference between the beta suspension and what became the gamma suspension, we had a beta suspension. We went out,
Right.
we did our testing, we refined that a good bit, and then went back and built basically a gamma suspension
Mhm.
that we're testing. And that's really what we sent over to Europe, was this
Okay.
kind of gamma-ish suspension. And they basically said, it very close, but we suggest, these changes and these changes,
Mhm.
some of which got us a little better turning radius, some of which got us a little better low speed predictability
Okay.
when driving. So kind of some of the nuances of daily driving that some of these guys that have built, cars and vehicle programs for the last 30 years know that, our young team here hasn't had as much experience with. But, we've had some amazing contributors to the suspension. We worked with Roush Engineering to start to get the basics of the suspension, then basically had our own team work on it for 6 months ish. And then that got us to the Gamma suspension, and then had Denise Engineering basically design it for manufacturability and how we actually produce 50 to 100,000 of these things a year. So from the bushings to the materials, to the draft angles, to how we actually connect other stuff like the brake hoses and things like that to it. That was really what Denise kind of took across the finish line.
Okay. And then you
Along the
said,
way, they
uh-huh.
had some suggestions because you get new engineers involved and they look at it and they're like, oh, well, if you do this, could be a little, if you do this, you could be a little better. So
Okay, got it. And so now, as of like, I guess a few weeks ago, that the suspension design is like finalized, and you can send it to the supplier to make, right?
yes, yeah.
And so is that what's happening now? Is it being made?
Yeah, we haven't chosen all the suppliers for all the metal parts, so we're still considering some different quotes
Mhm,
on who we want to make what parts. And some of it's a timing consideration, some of it's a money consideration.
mhm,
But obviously we want parts as quickly as possible so we can test. I know our last interview, we thought that we'd probably have prototypes in July, August, and here we are in May. So
mhm.
time is creeping by for sure.
Yeah.
And I think we could still probably have some vehicles rolling around in August. Our target is still July.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Releasing these big metal parts for the chassis and suspension so late, we're really going to be waiting on those things, especially like the big. It'll be a die casting at the end of the day for the rear of the suspension and the front clip that holds the front suspension. Those are big, complex parts, and
Mhm,
to get them sand cast and then post milled,
mhm.
it just takes longer than if you were able to smash them out of a die, like the Giga Press does for Tesla parts and other stuff.
How about the big frame that goes around the battery? Is that one large piece or is that multiple pieces?
Well, there's a battery frame, and then there's
Uh-huh.
a frame that goes up to the body structure.
Uh-huh.
They're both separate and distinct. The battery frame is really just extruded aluminum
Uh-huh.
that has these corner die cast nodes that get welded together, and
Mhm.
then there's kind of center supports that support the vehicle longitudinally and laterally.
Maybe
Um,
I'm calling it the wrong thing. I'm talking about like that, I guess the chassis then. The thing that the battery like
sure.
drops into, that it looks like a big oval ring, and like the front wheels and the back wheels attached to that.
Yeah, we've been calling it the frame or
The
the chassis. If it's
okay.
got suspension on it, then you'd call it a chassis. If it's
Uh-huh.
just the frame without the suspension arms, then you'd probably just call it a frame.
Yeah, so is that frame one piece? And
That frame is 6 pieces right now.
okay.
And we think that we could combine a couple of those pieces and bring it down to 4 pieces in the future. It would just cost more tooling cost in the future.
So
Um,
is
but
that
we'll have
thing made or is that being made?
it's being made right now. So
Okay.
the last changes that Denise made was to the front suspension.
Mhm,
So where those pickup points are for the front suspension, and now that that's done, we've released all. And it's been a couple weeks
mhm.
since we released that, but it's been off with the suppliers, and some suppliers are a few weeks, and some suppliers are a few months. So we're really evaluating those. I think we had a meeting on it yesterday, but I
Okay.
don't put a pin on exactly who we're going to have make those parts. But that the rails and then basically the two end caps that hold the front and rear suspension,
Mhm.
those will be made separately, and then we'll probably bring them back here to be welded up, or we'll have one of the shops that we know put it on a jig table and weld it up. But obviously, it has to be very dimensionally tolerant because
Mhm.
the rear suspension has to be aligned with the front suspension,
Right.
or weird things happen.
Right, right. Okay. So we don't know. So they're if they're being made and you haven't even picked a supplier for the suspension parts yet.
Well, we have the suppliers for the production parts. The
Uh-huh.
problem is getting these 16 development vehicles done. So
Okay.
We're starting with 3, and then we'll build the rest after the first 3, because we'll
Mhm.
probably learn some from putting together the first 3.
Mhm.
That's where we're at now.
But
Is
the production guys are like, we can't make you 20 of them.
Yeah, they don't
Okay.
play that game.
Okay.
But some of them do, but it's very expensive and they take a long time. So,
Uh-huh.
there's shops that specialize in just quick turning
Mhm.
milled aluminum stuff, and they're all over the world.
I
A lot
see.
a lot of great shops in LA, a lot of great shops in Detroit, a lot of great
Mhm.
shops in Asia. There are some great shops in Italy, in
Mhm.
Europe. So that's we've got quotes out to all those places.
I see. So it's kind of like backwards from the way that I imagined it. I imagined that you guys would do the PI vehicles and find those suppliers, but actually you guys have already found the production suppliers. Like that's been nailed down, and it's
Yeah, one of
these
the
like prototype suppliers that you guys are trying to figure out now.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about the CPC relationship was they also brought, a whole world of supply chain stuff that is used to doing vehicles in our volumes,
Mhm.
supercar world and, low volume production European vehicles. It's
Mhm.
not something that really exists in the US. So you go to Detroit and you ask somebody, hey, do you build 20,000, 50,000 vehicles a year? And they're like, no, we don't want
Yeah.
your build. We want the 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 vehicle programs, or we're
Mm.
not interested. So so yeah, over a year ago, when we started to finalize our designs for the main bink structure and body structure, then we got introduced to a lot of great connections in Europe that CPC has worked with,
Mhm.
great working relationships with over the years, and they build volume parts for Fiat and Maserati and
Mhm.
VW and a lot of European brands like that. So
Okay.
they're they're
So
well capable, but they're also used to building for 10, 20, 50,000 units a year, not necessarily 500,000.
mm. So most of your production suppliers are relationships that you got through CPC, so they're your most likely European suppliers.
I would say most of the mechanical components
Mhm.
have been European. So the body structure, the frame, the chassis, those things have come from Europe. The
Okay.
glass, is a Spanish company from Spain. The interior company is in Italy there. So, but the electronics and battery stuff, that's not something that CPC really had relationships for. So we found that on our own.
Right. So in the update, it looked like you guys had like a local partner that was doing the tab welding on the battery packs that you're testing now.
Yeah, it's the supplier that sells us the robots to do it ourselves. So we
Okay.
have California Energy Commission grant, and we're,
Mhm.
we're testing out the robots, and then they'll end up on the floor here to make the battery packs here, along with the automation equipment that CTNS is building for us. So
Okay.
um, we're responsible for the design and validation of that design for the battery modules and the battery pack and the power
Mhm.
distribution and the busing and all that stuff, contactors, DC, FC, fast charge, that sort of stuff. But CTNS, they do the automation to actually build it at scale and really churn through the volume on that stuff. So
Okay. So they're not going to be the ones, CTNS is not building the packs for the PI vehicles.
they are building the factory
Uh-huh.
in Korea that will build those packs. And
Mhm.
then they're going to transport that factory here and build
Mhm.
those packs for us here.
Okay. But
But
that's
they're
for
more
the,
responsible for the factory part of it,
right.
not
They're,
necessarily the design logic or any of the validation or anything.
okay. Yeah. So they're building the machine to build the machine. Um, but but like these test production intent vehicles, not the production vehicles, the production intent vehicles, CTNS is not building those packs. You guys are building those packs kind of one by one.
Yeah, they're doing manufacturing trials. So they're actually building battery modules now too, but
Okay.
that to validate how they're going to build them in volume production.
Okay.
We'll be making, like, if we learn anything from our validation durability testing, like
Uh,
this week, one of our battery modules is off at a shaker jig, and it'll shake it, up to what is 150,000 miles of durability. And we'll see if, any of the hold down brackets break, or um, if any of the ends of the power busing, shake too much and break one of the welds or something. I mean, it's to just test, the durability of the thing.
mhm.
But if we learn anything, then we would make those changes
Hmm.
and then CTNS would build that module per our changes.
Hmm.
So we're responsible for design, release, and validation. They're responsible for how does the robot pick up the cell, put it in the module? How does the robot put the current collector plate on it and then send it over to the robot that welds it all, then sends it over to the foam machine that pots it. And then you got this, stack of battery modules. How does the robot pick up that stack of battery modules and put it into a 6-module pack?
Hmm.
Load up the power distribution, close up the pack, seal the pack, and have it ready for, installation into an Aptera vehicle. So they'll perfect that manufacturing of the pack in
Hmm.
Korea and
Okay,
probably build the first couple hundred packs there.
I
And then
see.
they'll ship those packs to us for the first couple hundred vehicles. And then we'll take a pause while they ship all the manufacturing equipment, that whole assembly line here and
Oh, okay.
in California and in Carlsbad, then we'll be producing those modules and packs here.
Okay, so the plan is not to have two concurrent battery lines. You're gonna move the whole battery line from Korea to there.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yep.
okay. 'Cause I kind of thought that like they were gonna build it and then you were gonna build a second one here and then like build them together or something.
If we had infinite capital,
Oh, you would do
we
that.
could do some
Because
things
I'm
like
guessing
that.
that the equipment must be very expensive then, so it must be worth the shipping cost of shipping it over.
Yeah, the most expensive part is the armed robots that move stuff around and have to be really accurate.
Mm,
And laser welding robots that weld the current collector onto the battery modules. They're just they're expensive pieces of tech.
yeah.
Uh, they're not terribly huge or difficult to ship. So,
Mhm.
we have to decide, are we going to put those things on a plane or are we going to ship them by sea? I imagine we're probably going to put them on a plane and ship them over here.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, we're gonna divvy up this into three parts, mainly because I am out of town for this week, and I want to give you guys some content on the regular schedule that we've been going on. But in the rest of the videos, we're gonna talk about why they decided to not go low volume and put out a few first, some more timelines, and about the funding situation. All right, so stay tuned for those. Those will come out on the normal Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule.